So I'm Luann Budd, and I'm the president of NEWIM, and NEWIM is all about connecting women with other women who share their roles and who share their heart to love and serve Jesus. And so tonight we are going to have a conversation with Kristy Howard, and Kristy is mom of five. She lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and has been married to Jeremy for many years. And for the first 20 or so, I think she was a pastor's wife. Jeremy was pastoring a church, and then recently they stepped down, and they are both now chaplains. And Kristy has had a Facebook group for pastors' wives for about the last 10 years. And she also writes for Substack. She's a wonderful author and writer, and I really enjoy reading her writing. So Kristy wrote an article for us in the NEWIM newsletter, and I thought since it was short, I would just read it for us so that then we can have that. Kristy can share kind of her backstory and some of the things behind that, and then we can ask her some questions about it, and then I have some questions too. So we'll have plenty of time for conversation. So let me share my screen so then you can see her article, and I will read it to us. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, she said, you don't have to hold it all together. Somewhere along the journey of ministry, many of us, maybe most of us, absorb the quiet message that we're supposed to hold it all together. Keep the team running, keep the family cared for, keep our face composed, our hearts soft, our inbox cleared, and our Bible study prepped. And yet, behind the gentle smile or the well-crafted sermon, there's often a deep weariness, a loneliness, even grief. If that's where you are right now, friend, I say this as clearly as possible? You don't have to hold it all together. In fact, you were never meant to. Ministry, especially as a woman, can carry unspoken expectations. We become the person others come to for comfort, guidance, vision, and strength. We're told, or we assume, that to be faithful means to be unshakable. But even Jesus, in his fullness of divinity and humanity, drew away to rest. He wept. He allowed himself to be ministered to. If the Son of God wasn't afraid to pause, to let others carry the moment, why should we be? A place to let God. One of the gifts Newham has offered for 40 years is space, a sacred invitation to exhale. At retreats like the Springs, women don't have to perform. We don't have to teach or fix or inspire. We simply show up. And what happens in that space is holy. Tears come, silence heals, laughter returns, and often the whisper of the Holy Spirit gets a little louder in our hearts. Joy and strength start to rise, not because we're doing anything, but because we've let go of everything long enough for God to hold us. If you're reading this with tears in your eyes or a knot in your chest, I want you to know something else. You're not alone. Your weariness is not failure. Your need for rest is not weakness. It's okay to say, I can't carry this today. It's okay to take your hands off the wheel because Jesus never asked you to hold it all together. He simply invites you to hold on to him. As we celebrate 40 years of NEWIM, we celebrate you, the woman who has poured out love and wisdom, who has faithfully said yes even when it was hard, and now maybe it's your turn to receive, to step away, to be still, to be reminded that your value isn't in your doing, it's in your being, a beloved daughter, held and known.
You-
So isn't that sweet? So, Kristy, share with us your backstory.
Oh, well, I'm going to be honest with you. Just hearing you read that out loud kind of made me feel emotional. I feel like coming on the other side of a very heartbreaking because I tried so hard for so long to hold together. I'm a type A personality, very driven, very by the book. I want it done right. And I grew up in a preacher's home. I have a lovely legacy of family who loved God. But there were a lot of expectations. I'm not gonna lie, there was some collateral damage. My grandparents were vocational ministry ministers, and my great grandparents too. And so it was just very normalized for me that you were strong, you were a loner, you didn't need a lot of people. I mean, I was even told, it was almost like a good thing, like, leaders are alone, eagles fly alone. And so I just adopted that mentality. I don't even remember not having that mentality. And so when I grew up, I got out of high school, I went to Bible college, I married a minister, and here we go. And so I was doing what I knew I was called to do. But man, I lasted about 9 years before I completely burn out. Um, I had four children. We had four children, but five. But at the time, we had four children. We were pastoring in a rural area, so very far away from any support. We didn't have friends or family there. We made friends there. We became close to people, but I did not know how to have support systems. I did not know how to really be real with people. I'll be honest, Luann and friends, I didn't know how to be real with myself. I did not know how to say, I'm tired. This is hard. I had a lot of old baggage too that I had never really been taught how to unpack. And when I was 29, I was pregnant with our fourth child, our son. And I remember I was in our kitchen at our house, and we had company over. It was a Sunday night, and we had, I think, a visiting minister and his wife were over in their kids. And I I was heading into, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was heading into what became a several year, really, I don't know if you would call it episode, it was a season of heavy depression and anxiety that um, I didn't really know if I was ever going to get out of it. But that was like, I was in the middle of just kind of snapping. And I didn't see it until hindsight, but I remember leaning over the refrigerator to pull out, I think, lunch meat to make sandwiches for our guests. And I remember I was sick. I was nauseated. I had a horrible pregnancy. I was just miserable. And I opened my refrigerator, and I'm a clean freak. I'm a perfectionist. And I was so embarrassed when I realized my refrigerator was really sticky. It was yucky. I hadn't cleaned it out. I didn't remember last time I'd cleaned it out. And I remember the minister's wife was behind me, and I was so frantic. She was going to see inside my refrigerator, and I grabbed some lunch meat and I slammed the door. And I remember just thinking, I wonder if my whole house looks like this. Like, because I just realized at that moment, I haven't looked at anything. Like, I just keep showing up, but I'm not really, I'm not taking care of anything. And I scanned really quickly, like frantically, and my husband had tidied up, and I was like, oh, thank God. I just remember I collapsed into our table there, the chair in the kitchen. I just kind of zoned out, and I just remember thinking, I'm not okay. That was kind of the first time I admitted to myself, I am not okay. And what followed were, some, I had some health scares with that pregnancy. Our son was pretty sick after that. I had anxiety. It kind of just snowballed into what became a really dark season. But it was that, for some reasons, that one day, that just refrigerator being yucky and having people over and not, it took me like realizing I'm not okay. And it was horrifying for me to say that to myself, because I had never been honest with how I felt or how I was doing, how we were doing. And I was in survival mode. And it took a breaking for me to really get to the point where I was able to be honest with God and honestly be desperate. Really, it took that to make me be humble and to realize, Krista can't, just white knuckle through this. This is a long, this is a marathon. I'm treating it like a sprint, and I'm losing air here. And it was what felt like an impossibly hard season for me to admit, hey, I'm weak. I've pushed myself too far. I'm frustrated with my kids all the time. I'm not able to keep up. I don't have to be. I couldn't tell myself, you don't have to be able to keep up, because I felt like I did. I shouldn't ever get to the point where, I couldn't function in all the roles. And I don't know why that one day stands out so much to me, but it was like I was honest with myself for the first time. It was not okay. And when I look back, I mean, I'm 44, I was 29 at the time. And I think nobody in my church expected that,
Mhm.
um, and there may have been a few people who may have had expectations, and later in another next church we were in, and we did have a lot of church hurt. That's a whole other story. But looking back, those were internal expectations. Those were things that I had adopted from, maybe things had been projected, just maybe how I had internalized what other people expected of me. I knew it didn't come from God, but at the time I thought it did. I thought faithfulness looked like burnout because that's what I experienced every day. And I remember probably a year and a half later, we actually moved from that area into Fort Worth to pastor a different church. And I just remember thinking, God, I can't, move on top of dealing with this anxiety and this depression and having these 4 little kids. And now we have a new church. And I remember was driving with my husband in just the maze that is Fort Worth traffic and all the bridges and all the overpasses. And I just felt externally like the overwhelm matched what I felt inside. And I just remember I asked the Lord, how am I going to do this? This is like extra hard now. And the Lord told me, it was not an audible voice, but I knew it was the Spirit of God, told me gently, Kristy, you're going to have to change how you think. And if you change how you think, you're going to be okay. I'm going to help you. You're going to be okay. And it wasn't a condemnation, because I struggled so much with so much guilt all the time, because I never was doing enough. I was never like, it was this hamster wheel inside of me, personality, background, just all the things, I don't even know which came first of my struggles, but like all of it just made me so driven and guilt driven as well. And so it wasn't the Lord, it wasn't a guilt. I did not feel guilt in that moment, even though I felt like the Lord put his finger on like this. It wasn't I'm not saying God was like, this is your fault, but it was like I had agency all of a sudden. And the Lord just kind of said, if you will let me help you change how you think, you're going to get on the other side of this. And I just remember telling the Lord, yes, show me, show me. I don't know how to untangle, my mindsets and my guilt proneness and my rule following. And there's a lot of layers of legalism in my mind, just from growing up the way I did, and just the kind of the culture of the way I was raised, and the way I had been taught to live, and how I had been taught that God's expectations were. There was a lot of layers of works-based, and that was exhausting. And so I did not see all that at that time. I just knew God said, if you're willing to change how you think, I'm going to help you, and you're on the other side of this. And so that kind of was kind of my backstory of, I have so much compassion for women in ministry who are struggling with burnout. And I know it can look like a lot of different things. For me, there was a lot of external burnout, just because I had a lot of, I had 5 kids, and, pastoring, rural churches. I'm sure mega churches are the same, but, we wore all the hats, we were always there. We were never not there, kind of thing. And it's its own kind of, weariness sometimes. But so whatever brings, a woman in ministry to burnout, I feel that pain, although I may not have experienced the exact same thing, because I know it's so hard and it's so dark. And a lot of times for us in ministry, it's accompanied by guilt. And
Mhm.
I'll never totally understand that, because we are usually all trying so hard and doing so much, and yet we feel like we're never doing enough. We can never rest.
Mhm.
And so just that holding it all together, when you realize you can't, it's horrifying until you realize it's freeing, because then there's this space of vulnerability, of grace, and God can put his finger on something in your life to say, here's where I'm going to help you. And instead of the guilt and shame that I was used to carrying, it was like, oh, I don't have to hold this all together. I've been trying for a really long time, and I finally admitted it doesn't work. And that was horrifying and scary. And then that's where the freedom actually starts, and it cracks open that white knuckle grip for
Mhm.
me on control, and having to be the one that looks like she's got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your backstory with us. Does anyone have any questions, or can you relate to her? Have you experienced anything similar in your life?
Well, I sure have.
Mm.
So, uh, my husband and I met 50 years ago, and we were in vocational ministry for decades. And if I had not gotten involved with NEWIM 40 years ago, I would have sunk.
Mm.
Yeah. And one of the things that I love about the NEWIM gals is that everybody is authentic and understanding and supportive and encouraging, and you can pour your heart out to them. And NEWIM really was the lifeline thrown to me in as a young pastor's wife. And boy, thank you for sharing that, Kristy, because you said it so well. You summed up the pressures of what it is to be a pastor's wife, period, but a young pastor's wife with, I mean, how many balls can you keep and up in the air without dropping them? And you felt like you were, at a point of dropping all of them, perhaps, or most of them. But here's the thing: when you have that many people depending upon you, you can't give up.
Right.
Can't quit. You got to keep going, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I'm really curious as to, once God met you with the, okay, I'll help you change your mind. What you did, what was helpful for you to move into a place where you could not only survive but thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd be really curious, but I'm sure there are other people that want to talk, so I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Betsy. No, I would love to have you, Christine. Do you want to respond to that? Yeah.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, that was of its own. Like I said, I was 29 when I kind of hit that breaking point, and I'm 44 now. So you're looking at, 15 years ago. It's been a journey for sure, and there's been a lot of ups and downs. But I think the first thing for me was just honestly feeling like God was handing agency to me because of my background and just some of the things that shaped me as a teenager, and even to my young adults. I felt very I felt like I was trained and taught to be very codependent on spiritual authority. So that could look like, my parents, it could look like whoever was telling me what they thought God expected of me. And so that was a real struggle I had, was feeling stuck. I hate that feeling, hate that feeling. And so I had a lot of anger. I had a lot of frustration. I didn't know why I was so frustrated or why I was angry. I was trying to be really good and do all the good things and, loved being in ministry theoretically, but it was killing me. And my husband didn't know what to do. My husband's a very easygoing guy, and so it wasn't him, but I didn't know who else. So it was really a lot of tension in my mind and my body, and then in our relationships. And so I feel like God just so kindly was like, Kristy, like you're not in charge in the way you think you are, but really you get to decide if you're gonna have a delightful life or you're gonna bring demise upon yourself. So I needed agency. And so when the Lord said to me, you can change how you think, you can change your mindset, and I'll help you, I felt hope at that point. And so I really began, and this is going to sound, I don't want it to sound overly spiritual because I felt anything but overly spiritual. I felt like I was sucking air and going down. I started digging into the Word of God. I'm talking about baby steps, like a few verses. I remember I looked up every verse I could find that had the phrase sound mind. And yes, we're talking about that. So that was what I was used to reading. So I went there and I just looked up every verse and I read every context. I looked it up in other versions of the Bible and I looked it up what it meant. And because I felt like I did not have a sound, there's no soundness for me. I was falling apart from the inside out, and anxiety and depression and, panic attacks. Like I was falling apart, and that wasn't me. I'm a typically pretty strong person. And so, for me to feel like all loose ends was horrifying. So I just started, and I would read it and I would write it and I would journal and I would read it over and over and over. And I was looking back, I realized I was locking in on truth because I didn't feel very stable. My emotions didn't feel stable. We had made a big move from a rural area to a city, which was hard on our kids. It was hard. It was very different. So everything around me was feeling kind of at loose ends. I definitely felt uncorked on the inside. And so I just started just think, what is God's nature? You know, about soundness of mind, and what did he say about me? And I just would read over the same verses over and over, and just kind of really, it was combating lies with truth, because I had so much in my mind that wasn't true about God, and I didn't realize it at the time. But it was really foundational for me to understand God's nature wasn't harsh and disappointed in me all the time, because this is exactly what I thought about God. I didn't realize I did. And I also plugged into women who were a few seasons ahead of me in life, who were either authors or podcasters. Luann was one. She reached out to me through our Facebook group for pastors' wives, and the connection was very important to me because it gave me just someone who was saying, Kristy, I see you. And I didn't really have among my circle of people too much that I knew in person. And so again, I made the mistake, and it was very ingrained in me, like, to be an island to myself. You know, it was like, I don't even know why. It was just the culture that I don't know. That was in my mind. You protect yourself, you have walls, you don't trust. And so I was just sinking and didn't realize it. And so Sally Clarkson was another one. I read books. I was just kind of trying to reprogram my mind. I wasn't, God was. I didn't realize really what was going on, except I knew that God said, you'll change how you think. And I knew I was very negative. I didn't know why. I knew I was frustrated. And I also, it was kind of a long story getting there, but I had a midwife who had been with me with my really difficult pregnancy, and she had a friend who was a family therapist. And I said, look, I called my midwife. I was like, I'm struggling. Like, I don't know what to do. And so she referred me to her, and I began getting into counseling. And that also, just having somebody I could be super honest with. It didn't matter what she thought of me, what I said. And she was a devout Christian. And so that became a lifeline for me, where I could kind of begin to unravel. And it was years. And I don't know, hopefully everyone's story isn't complicated, but I had a lot of baggage to unpack. And I didn't. And I remember when I got off a call with the counselor. I was like, I told my husband, I just sat on the front porch and I'm just kind of processing for a bit. And I found Jeremy, and I was like, Jeremy, like, I realized I have anger issues. Like, yeah, I know. It's like, why didn't you tell me? He's like, well, Kristy, like, what good would that have done? Like, that was just, would you have believed me? I was like, no. And just like an awakening for me just to own things. So it was a process of finding mentors, the word of God, just plugging into vehemently what is God's nature, what is his truth, and then being willing to let go that I had believed about God. And then counseling helped me tremendously get through that rough time, and then some other ones that popped up over the years, and just giving myself permission to enjoy my children, life, messes, just I was so controlling, honestly, just I wanted peace, and I didn't know how to create it inwardly, so it was outward. I was trying to micromanage everything. And slow process of God being so kind and helping me see his nature was not what I thought it was. And then I was able to just begin to slowly, I heal. I don't know what else to say. And, vocational ministry, it's still, I'm not a pastor's wife at this time, but vocational ministry doesn't really change as far as the domain, just like being a mom or being a wife, like there's always needs. You always have always the demand. And it's really you that changes from the inside out that gives you different capacity. and we're always growing. You know, Luann inspires me. She's constantly growing and talking about some of the just the everyday things that she has. I'm like, oh my goodness, her life is so full and still. And I just see her graciousness. So I know that it's possible to constantly lean into growth and capacity as long as we're here. But yeah, it was definitely just growth and just messy.
Yeah, a messy process, but it's
Yeah.
so good to
Yes.
receive God's grace. Are there others relate to this, struggle with this, have a question for Kristy?
I really relate to just about everything you just talked about. um, so my husband and I have been in ministry for 20 years. It was 20 years this year that we've been married, but we were doing ministry together before we were married as well. And we were in a difficult ministry situation about, so a year after we got married, we moved away from family to take a job. And in that time, we had our first child, and then the pastor who hired us resigned, and the church hired a new pastor, and he didn't care for us very much. And it was a very, just like as you were describing things, saying you started to have panic attacks and those kind of things. That was the first time I started having things like that. And never in my life had I had anxiety, panic, like nothing like that. And so here we were in a state with no family. I had a baby, and I felt like everything was just imploding around me. And my husband sounds like your husband, very easygoing and, like doing fine. And I was just suffering, and I didn't know what to do. And I did reach, and where we lived, it was a small town, and almost everybody was related to everybody else at all the churches. Like you couldn't go somewhere where someone was related to somebody. So it was really hard to keep things private. But I did manage to get a hold of somebody who recommended a counselor. And so I went and saw someone for a little bit, just because I was getting to the point where I felt like I didn't trust anybody to talk to anybody about anything, because everyone was so connected. And it was good. It was helpful. But I really feel like we ended up leaving there, obviously, after about 18 months of sitting under that leadership, and moving back to where my family is, where we are now. And even for years after, I was still just reeling from that and struggling to trust the people we were serving with, and feeling like I couldn't get close to them just because there were so many things that were done. There was just nothing we could do was right. And the pastor who hired us when we went there, they were very kind and very nurturing. And this was our first like big full time, ministry position. And so then for them to leave, that was already like, oh, they're leaving. So sad. And then this couple comes in, and I mean, his wife wasn't really that nice to me, or the other pastor's wife, and they actually left too. They left before we did. And so it was just a very difficult thing. And I carried that around for so long, just the fear of trusting anybody. And I think, I mean, just everything we're saying, I was like, oh my goodness, yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Because you get to that point. And I wrote down something that you said, like, you can't just white knuckle through this. And sometimes I definitely tried. I definitely tried. It didn't go very well.
Right. Thank you, Erin.
I just stumbled upon your page, Kristy, your Facebook page, the Facebook group not that long ago. And I don't know, maybe in the last month. And everything you post, I just love it. It just resonates with me so much. And I'm grateful for your voice, what you're putting out there. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Even when I was sharing that, I was thinking, I sound so stupid. This is so dumb. And so just hearing you say, I'm not glad you went through those things. That's not what I mean. But I feel like there's this feeling of, I must be the only one who is sucking air and having such a hard time, like what I'm saying? And so it does feel very good to feel like this is redemptive because we're not alone as humans in this struggle. And there's nothing new under the sun, I guess. And so thank you for sharing that. That actually is very encouraging to me, that, it's not, because sometimes it's scary to share,
Mm-hmm.
it feels scary.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, for sure. My experience too, I remember, yeah, just running until we were just bone dead tired and exhausted. For the time you get up, you're dealing with children as soon as your feet hit the floor, and then you're going all day, and then you're going all night, and at midnight you drop into bed, and then you get up and do it again the next day. And I remember we were at Bible study. I was leading the women's Bible study at church, and my husband poked his head in the door and said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, Dean Samuelson is coming for dinner and he's going to stay with us for a week."
Oh,
And then he left. And afterwards, the friends in the Bible study said they just watched my face, just
yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah.
totally die. Dean Samuelson was a Harvard-trained medical
Oh,
missionary,
wow.
and he was going to come to my house with my 5 little kids. And where was he going to stay for a week? We didn't have a spare bedroom. And I was thinking, run home after Bible study and thinking about what am I going to do and how am I going to feed him and
Yeah.
and all the women showed up to help me clean
Oh,
the house.
oh,
And
wow.
I was just, I went from being ready to commit suicide and just like, I can't deal with the humiliation of this, to, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that they came and they would help me. But as a pastor's wife, you just put all these expectations on yourself of who you have to be, and it can just bury you.
Yeah.
And I'm serious about thinking about suicide. I mean, it was like the only way out that I could see, at the time. It was just like crazy. So, yeah, others of you, how have you felt the weight of the heaviness of expectations of your own or others, and how have you dealt with it?
Well, Kristy, I love to just thank you for sharing your story and just for writing your words so eloquently about your experience. I think all of us on this call tonight can just relate, not maybe necessarily as specific as your particular situation, but relate in a whole lot of ways to just how we go through different seasons of weary and overwhelm. And I'd like to ask you, when you wrote in your article about Jesus resting and weeping and receiving care, what part of his example speaks most deeply to you? And then to follow up with that, what truths about God's character most anchor you when you feel weary or overwhelmed?
Oh, man, those are good questions. I think just as far as Jesus' example, just his willingness to own his humanness. We know he didn't have to be human, and he surely didn't have to own it. Just the fact he took time to rest when he was the one who calmed the storm, but yet he was asleep. I almost find that paradoxical, I felt like the disciples frantically trying to, either jump ship or, paddle, get the water out or go frantically wake him up. And he had the power to stop the storm, and yet he was sleeping through it. And I find that almost hard to wrap my brain around, but his willingness just to go take a nap, to show his emotion at the death of his friend when he knew he was literally about to raise him from the dead. He didn't have to show his grief. He didn't have to feel it, So I just find his willingness to participate in humanity very humbling, because I don't like owning my humanity. Then that made me realize, that's pride, and not in a, oh, you're a naughty girl, Kristy, look, but just like Jesus saying, come learn who I am, because you are too big for your britches, girl. If I can do this, you can do this. And it really just lifted this load off of me that Jesus Christ walked out his humanity. And if he did, and he didn't have to, I don't have a choice. I can fight it and resist it and not thrive and not reach any of the potential that he created me with, or I can take his yoke, which he said is light. So to me, this Jesus being willing to walk out his humanity just blew my mind completely, because I was doing a really bad job of that, and I am far from God, as we all are. And then the nature of God. Oh, yeah. So I was sitting in a conference years ago. It was a few years after my little dirty refrigerator incident. And my youngest child, who's now 12, was probably about a year or a year and a half old, because he was old enough I could go to a mom conference. I went to Sally Clarkson's conference, and I was so excited. Like, this was huge for me. And I remember that a guest speaker, wasn't Sally Clarkson, it was just a guest speaker, got up, and I do not remember what her message was about, because she just kind of threw in this little anecdote, and she just quoted almost randomly, because it really didn't go with anything else. It was a great message, but it wasn't the theme of the message. But she said, it's the kindness of God that brings us to repentance. And when she said those words, it was like the whole room stopped for me, and God just opened my eyes. And I felt like God did a miracle in my mind and my heart, and said, I am kind, Kristy. And I look back at that minute sitting in that conference room. I don't even know if she remembers saying it, because it wasn't anything she was talking about, but that was eye-opening for me. And that is something I lean on constantly, about the nature of God. And it helped me sift through loads and loads of lies about the nature of God, about what's expected of us, legalistic rules that I had to untangle from, that are not my salvation and not even necessary, because I lean on his nature, his kindness brings us to repentance. We do have to repent. We do have to change. We do have to grow in him. It's part of the sanctification process. It's part of the growth process, but it's not his disapproval. It's not his harshness. It's not his, I caught you being bad again, which is the way I always perceived it. So the kindness of God, it does not mean he's not sovereign. It doesn't mean he's not in control. It doesn't mean he's not the judge of all things, but he is kind. Mm-hmm. He is kind. That is his nature. And that one scripture, just the kindness of God brings, it depends on what version you read, the goodness of God, the kindness of God. I needed to hear kindness. Mm-hmm. Because I had read goodness of God, but that to me is like, oh, you're dotting all the I's and crossing all, the T's. If you're good, I know how to be good. And so her just quoting that just was just a moment of a life-changing moment for me. And his nature, his love, that's what draws us closer and changes us, not his disapproval, which is how I always perceived it, which was very shaming, very, guilt driven, very works based. And I was that way toward my children, so it totally changed me as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, and then as a, pastor's wife now, as a chaplain. When I have capacity for empathy that I didn't have before, because I know God is empathetic. He feels with us. So in the nature of God, it's just like a ongoing study that we learn more and more about him. And as we do, we're changed.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that. Looking to his character and knowing who he is and all of his goodness and his beauty, his kindness, his compassion, and how that really changes then how we see him seeing us.
Yes.
And that smile, the delight that he has in us, yes. The love that he has for us, calling us his daughters, it's just so deeply meaningful. And it does speak truth to the lies that we tell ourselves.
Yes.
Well, we have 5 minutes left. So thank you so much for a wonderful conversation and participation. And it's just so good to hear your stories. And we would love to close with a few minutes of prayer. And, this is I'm going to turn off the